For something like 70 years now, we've been totally obsessed with one question. Can machines actually think? Well, it turns out all the debates we're having about AI right now, they're not new at all. They're just the latest chapter in a long, pretty dramatic story. So we're going to break down that history, from a single question to the incredible tools that are changing our world as we speak. Let's get into it. Okay, picture this. It's 1950. The Cold War is heating up. And a British scientist and legendary codebreaker, Alan Turing, publishes this paper that kicks off with one simple, powerful question. Can machines think? It sounds so straightforward, right? But that single question literally kicked off an entire field of science. And let me tell you, what a journey it's been. This was no straight line of progress. It was more like a roller coaster ride, a story packed with bitter rivalries, mind-blowing breakthroughs, moments of insane hype, and then crushing disappointment. It's the story that led directly to the tools you're probably using every day, things like ChatGPT and Gemini. Now, the idea of creating artificial beings is actually ancient. You can go all the way back to Greek myths about Talos, this giant bronze robot built to guard an island. But it was really in the 20th century that this dream shifted from myth into a real, formal scientific quest, built on the brand new foundations of computing. So, to answer his own question, Turing came up with this clever idea he called the imitation game. Imagine you're a judge, and you're texting with two contestants, hidden in another room. One is a person, the other is a machine. Your job is to figure out who's who just from their answers. If you can't reliably tell the difference, well, Turing argued, then you got to admit the machine is capable of thinking. The field officially got its name in 1956. A professor named John McCarthy was organizing this big summer conference, and, he needed a catchy name. Some people say calling it artificial intelligence was a total marketing stroke of genius. It sounded futuristic, ambitious, and most important, it sounded like something you'd want to write a big check for. It worked, attracting money and talent to this new field. Okay, so this is where the plot really thickens. Right from that very first conference, the researchers basically split into two opposing teams. I mean, they both wanted the same thing, to build smart machines, but they had completely opposite ideas about how to do it. And this rivalry would define the next several decades of AI. So here's the fundamental difference. On one side, you had the symbolists. They basically believed intelligence was like a giant rule book. They thought if you could just program enough facts and logical rules, like if this, then that, into a computer, it would eventually become smart. On the other side were the connectionists. They said, no, that's all wrong. We should build systems that work like a human brain, systems that learn on their own by finding patterns. For a long time, the symbolists were totally winning. Their top-down approach gave us these things called expert systems. Think of it like a doctor in a box. A program from the 70s could actually diagnose bacterial infections by following a huge, complicated decision tree of rules. But the most famous example was a chatbot named Eliza. It created this amazing illusion of a real conversation using a ridiculously simple trick. It just spotted keywords and spat back a pre-programmed response. And here's the wild part. Eliza was unbelievably convincing. Its own creator, Joseph Weizenbaum, was floored. He said people, including his own secretary, got so attached they'd ask him to leave the room so they could talk to the machine in private. He actually spent years trying to convince people it wasn't really intelligent, that it was just a clever parlor trick, but the cat was already out of the bag. So, while the symbolists were having all this success, what about the connectionists? Well, they had this beautiful vision of building artificial neural networks that would learn just like a brain. But their idea was way, way ahead of its time. It was like they designed this incredible high-performance engine, but they didn't have the fuel or the roads to run it on. They were missing the two things they needed most: tons of data and the insane computing power to process it all. So for a long time, their approach just stalled out. And then the bubble burst. After all that early excitement, the whole field just hit a wall. People had promised the moon, and when they couldn't deliver, the funding dried up. But AI was about to find its comeback in a very unlikely place: the world of games. A really big blow came in '73. A critique pointed out that these rule-based systems only worked in super simple, limited environments. The real world is messy and chaotic, right? The number of possibilities just explodes. You can't write a rule for every single thing that might happen. That criticism, plus all the broken promises, led to what's now called the AI winters, these long periods where research funding just vanished. AI's big comeback story really has two major chapters. First, in 1997, IBM's computer Deep Blue beats the world chess champion Garry Kasparov. It won with pure, raw computational power, a brute force approach. It was a victory for the symbolist way of thinking. But then, fast forward nearly 20 years, DeepMind's AlphaGo beats the world champion of Go, a game that's infinitely more complex and intuitive than chess. This was the game changer. AlphaGo didn't win with brute force. It won using a neural network. It was the connectionists' big "I told you so" moment, finally made possible by modern computers and massive datasets. So, AlphaGo was huge. It proved that neural networks were the path forward. But there was still one more crucial piece of the puzzle missing, one final breakthrough needed to unlock the kind of AI we have today. In 2017, a paper drops from some researchers at Google, and its title sounds almost poetic. Attention is all you need. But don't let that simple title fool you. This paper was a bombshell. It introduced a new kind of architecture called the transformer, and it would completely revolutionize how machines understand language. So why was this such a big deal? Let me give you a super simple example. Look at these two sentences. The word bank is the same, but it means two totally different things. Before this, AI models really struggled with this because they read one word at a time in order. They had no real sense of the surrounding context. The transformer fixed this with a brilliant mechanism called self-attention. Instead of reading word by word, it looks at all the words in the sentence at the same time. It weighs the importance of every word against every other word. It learns, aha, I see the word river here, so this bank is probably the muddy kind, not the kind with money. It learned how to pay attention to the right clues in the context. And that right there, that's the secret sauce for modern AI like ChatGPT. You start with this transformer architecture. Then you train it on a library of text so big it's hard to even comprehend, basically a huge chunk of the internet. And here's the craziest part. Its only job is to guess the next word in a sentence. That's it. But when you make it do that billions and billions of times, something magical happens. It starts to absorb the patterns of grammar, logic, facts, and reasoning embedded in all that text, allowing it to generate shockingly coherent language. And that brings us right up to today. We've got these unbelievably powerful tools, but they also have some very real, very significant limitations. And they've sparked a huge, fierce debate about where all of this is actually going. The debate around AI today is super polarized. On one end, you have people who are convinced we're on the brink of artificial general intelligence, or AGI, a machine that can reason and outthink a human at literally any task. On the other end, you have critics who call these models stochastic parrots, arguing they're just sophisticated mimics, statistically guessing the next word without any genuine understanding. Most people are probably somewhere in the middle, but the core question is still up in the air. Because for all their power, let's be honest, these models still have major blind spots. They lack basic common sense. They don't really get cause and effect. Like if I drop this glass, it will break. And building and running them has a massive environmental cost, gobbling up enormous amounts of data, electricity, and water. So the next big frontier is figuring out how to make them learn more with less. And it's also worth remembering that this whole intense debate about AGI isn't just a scientific one. Some critics argue it's also a really useful narrative for big tech companies. If you frame AI as this world-changing superpower, it helps you secure billions in funding and lets you argue that only a handful of huge companies have the resources to build it safely, which centralizes control over the technology's future. So after this whole 70-year journey, we've gone from programming simple rules to creating systems that can predict human language with absolutely stunning accuracy. And it brings us right back to Turing's original question, just with a modern twist. We've taught machines to predict, but what will it take to teach them to truly understand? That is the central challenge and the question that will define the next chapter of this incredible story.